Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's the Historical Gamer once again, and today we're returning to our AAR, or After Action review of our Succession series with Tortuga Power, myself, and XTRG, in which we sort of debrief after our 30-plus episode series that was spanned across all of our channels for Rule the Waves, where we played as France, and each one of us took a 6-year turn as the Grand Admiral in charge of the French Navy. In our first part, we talked about kind of our initial thoughts going into the series, some of our initial impressions, some of our initial reactions to the way the series went, and also a little bit about ship design. In part 2 here, we're going to jump right into Tortuga's ship design philosophy, some of the ships he was really proud of, and go from there. So I hope you guys enjoy. See you at the end.
I want to talk about a few designs, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
First of all, maybe I'll do this compliment sandwich thing because I want to look at first the Cosmo. Can you bring up the Cosmo?
Which one?
Any of them is fine. The original, maybe.
The original.
So this is from XTRG's first tenure, and I have never built a light cruiser with more than 6-inch guns. And I also almost never, I think basically never use lower tier gun like main to secondary or secondary to tertiary, which is in very close proximity to the caliber of the previous gun. So what he had here is a 7-inch guns for his main, a ton of them, and then also 6-inch guns for his secondary, which I always thought was like a no-no because there is a combat penalty for firing different caliber shells at the same ship. So I didn't like this design when I first saw it, but this design was remarkably good. And I'm probably going to try to adopt something like this. I don't know how I will make it in my games, but considering this thing functioned, like every time there was a cruiser engagement with this ship against any other ship, I just beelined right towards the enemy ship and we sank it and we won. No problems every single time with the Cosmo. So I was very impressed by this design. This is probably the design that influenced me the most in this series was this one. Now I also want to take a look at, we somehow avoided looking at the Tourville. I think the Tourville is the 15,000 ton one. Is that?
Yes.
What?
Oh, yeah, this was the one I tried to engage the main French battleships with and didn't really think maybe 6 main guns might not be sufficient.
Yeah, I think this was a little bit strange. One of the things I want to ask XTRG about, kind of call him out on this on camera maybe, is what is your obsession or interest in having a center turret, a midship turret, which has no advantages of firing arc? But it's actually, the way you have it done here, if we were to redesign this, so okay, let's just look at the tonnage here is 13,835. If you go ahead and delete that midship and increase the turret of the aft, just, pretend like we're making a new ship, and we'll look at 1835 and we'll see what happens. Not the caliber, just the right click and it'll say increase guns. And then drop the midship, delete the midship. So this is now, it was cheaper, right? I mean, this is cheaper than having the midship gun. And the firing arc, if you update the firing arc as well, is better because the aft firing guns can fire everywhere the midship can, but the midship can't fire rear. So XTRG, I'm just curious, what is your interest?
I see this gap right here for torpedoes to come in and just like blow the ship in half. Just saying.
Oh, right. Yeah, we need a main gun which fires at torpedoes.
Exactly.
I'm curious. Go ahead. Your floor is yours.
Well, it's a fantastic place to hoist a flag. I mean, where else are you going to put that flag? It's like, the thing is, the all guns forward concept just doesn't quite work out in RTW. Sorry, it just doesn't quite work. But the idea of the middle gun was basically, there's no zones where we're lacking firepower. And you can see here the fire rush. Yes, they cover that. But you need firepower. And I like the midship guns. I just think they always look nice. I mean, what is the Japanese design? What was it now? Is it the Hyuga? The Hyuga with the 5 guns? Is it 5 or 6 guns? trying to recall the name of it now. I think it was the Hyuga. But basically, it was one of these Japanese battleships that had... was it a Haruga? I think it was Haruga, actually. That had something like 6 guns. God damn it, I should have done this research beforehand. But basically, I like the concept of the midship gun. I just like the fact that you just have something in the center there. So even if you're doing a extreme turn and your Afghan can't fire or your Afghan's knocked out, you still have something there. Because the midship gun, I don't know if it is a natural thing or not, it just seems a hell of a lot harder for it to be taken out just because of like the location of it. It's over the citadel of the ship, so theoretically would be the most armored part of the ship. I don't know, it's something different. Why not different?
I think this is a good answer, though. You did a lot of things which were really, really different. And that was like kind of the idea of this Succession series was like, let's combine 3 different people, have 3 different minds looking at the problem 3 different ways. And we can all hopefully, through the combat experience that each of these ships then goes through, suss out which of the ship designs is like a good one or not. So, okay.
Yeah, and to be honest, I don't mind the middle turret. I think the middle turret is more useful when you're a little bit earlier in technology and you don't have all the super firing turrets yet. If you look at, a lot of the battleship designs, which I think a lot of us kind of avoided, those early dreadnoughts where you had the wing turrets or whatnot because they couldn't figure out, I think it might have been a center of gravity thing, but putting the turrets all on the center line, those middle turrets are really valuable because at that point then you can fire in either direction and you don't need a turret on each wing, which I don't think, maybe we avoided in this game, but the middle turret was a very, like a real historical thing during the early Dreadnought era anyway that had value. Even before the Dreadnought era, I think it was the German, was it the Brandenburg class, which had, a 1 1 aft turret and then had a center turret. It had a different caliber because the guns had to be shorter to be able to swing back and forth through the middle of the ship. But it was, it allowed the Germans to have a pre-Dreadnought ship with 6 main guns as opposed to 4 like everybody else. I think it's a really interesting idea. And I do think as long as you don't get your T crossed, or as long as you're not trying to run from an enemy, which are 2, certainly scenarios you need to account for, it's superior to most other ships, barring a center firing, super firing turret.
Yeah, that might also play into what XTRG was saying earlier, that we start combat so close that crossing the T isn't really a thing. Everyone's just, or sometimes the combat situations in this. I'll just let you say it again, XTRG. Would you say that your midship firing turret would be better in maybe a more realistic simulation?
Well, in a realistic situation, I mean, the smoke sort of thing. It's like, let's take a look at the, what was the engagement now? It was part of the Battle of Jutland, like one of the early engagements, but where you had the British battle cruisers chasing down the German battle cruisers.
Dodger Bank.
Yeah, that'll be it. Was it the Blucher? Oh, which one was it now?
The Blucher was destroyed, and I mean, the interesting thing is with Dodger Bank is all of the German ships had a lot of their turrets knocked out. So that at one point they basically had no firepower going backwards as they were trying to run away. And that, gave the British quite a bit of an advantage. The Blucher wasn't really... It's interesting when you talk about the armored cruiser and the battle cruiser being designed to hunt down the armored cruisers. I kind of made a video a while back that was talking about how really the battle cruiser was not revolutionary in any way. It was just a further development of the armor cruiser, and the Blucher really kind of shows that off because it was this hybrid of what they thought the British were designing with their battle cruisers, where it had like 14 8-inch guns and really heavy armor. It just wasn't as fast. Which, if you look at some of the British British armored cruisers before, they had 10, 11-inch guns. They just didn't have as many of them. And I think it was just taking the Dreadnought idea and taking the cruiser and evolving it into that. It wasn't that revolutionary, in my opinion.
No, I mean, you see this quite a lot. I mean, with the real life examples, like the British tended to favor like high caliber guns, while the Germans tended to favor lower caliber guns, but they had an increased amount of them. I mean, was it the Battle of Coral Sea with the Germans under von Spee? They had
Falklands or Coronel, one or the other.
Both really. Well, I'd say Coronel, not Falklands. Falklands was really where von Spee had it coming with the battle cruiser being present there. Lucky bastard.
He had it coming.
Aye, but at the Battle of the Coral Sea, like, you see the fact that the British did tend to have higher caliber guns, but they had less of them. So when they did hit, they did cause some horrendous damage. But the fact is, the Germans just had the weight of firepower, and that really did show.
The Germans
So,
also had better, like, they had lower caliber guns, but they had much higher muzzle velocities on them, so they were relatively comparable.
And reliable shells, or more reliable shells, which was something that was seen really at Jutland, just how unreliable the British shells were.
Yeah, I'm just looking through. Is this the ESA? Let's just throw this on the screen. This is one of them that had, like, kind of a center.
Oh, yeah, there we go. It's like, say the ship is being chased and is going forwards, but the enemy's to the rear. Now, you'd only be able to fire the aft guns, wouldn't you? But if you were to take a course that was moving towards the port or starboard, you could maneuver the ship into such a position where you could bring the aft guns to start fire. Sorry, the center guns to start firing along with the aft guns. Now, the forward guns are just inconsequential at that moment. You can't do anything to bring them into the fight. You could turn the ship to bring them into the fight, but then you're basically turned towards the enemy or abreast to the enemy. So the centerline guns did have a lot of uses. They were more... it's just like weight of shells, really. Weight of metal downrange. And just slight tactical bonuses that you could bring if RTW was a little bit more tactical.
I noticed this trend. You like to blame the game for your ship design failures.
I can't blame myself, can I?
So I think my favorite chip design was the THG2, and I know my conning tower and my turret armor was a little bit light. I'm actually going to do what you were just doing and blame the game. The interesting thing I thought is my ships tended to be a little bit under armored. I think I kind of adopted a slightly modified British outlook, not quite as extreme maybe as Tortuga, but not quite as armor up as like Germany did historically. I think a lot of my ship designs I would look at. I've got this great book on battle cruisers. I forget, it's near me somewhere, but it's like 300 pages, and it talks about the 9 German World War I battle cruisers, and it has 3D renderings of what the ships look like and all of that. And I use that a lot in designing my ships, but I also based my ships on historical designs, tended to upgun them a bit. But it's interesting, if you look at the historical designs, this belt armor here, 12 inches, may not seem a lot, but it's actually comparable to a lot of the American battleships in World War II. What is different is the turrets tended to be like 18 or 19 inches of armor, and the game doesn't let you get as high in turret armor as historically was the case. Like, there were ships that had 20 inches of turret armor. The same for the conning towers. So I kind of accepted the limitations there and just said, all right, my belt's going to be relatively comparable. I'm going to go with heavier guns than historically was the case for most ships, and I'm just going to bury them with weight of firepower. I'm going to trust that I'm going to be able to engage far enough out that really the armor that'll matter is the belt. Unless I get unlucky and, a shell hits my conning tower, whatever, I'll take that as a risk. That I'm not going to get a direct hit on my conning tower, because even with 17-inch guns, well, 17-inch guns might be the wrong ones to look at, because you can penetrate everything at every... Like, if I jump my conning tower up to 15 inches, that's not going to matter unless it's just an extreme range, engagement. At 12,000 yards, that's not going to matter. Everything's going to get penetrated. And even if you drop that down to, like, a more realistic computer design, 16 inches of armor, unless I go really heavy in, like, 15, 16 inches of armor, even 16 inches of armor at 20,000 yards, it doesn't matter. You're going to have your armor penetrated. So, as you get into these more advanced ships with these heavier guns, I just went with the mantra of firepower beats all, and armor only matters in extreme range situations. And I kept finding myself in short range engagements. So better to get on top of them and obliterate them with firepower, because the extra armor is not gonna pay off, in my opinion.
I really follow the same kind of thing, actually. I really like glass cannon ships because, actually, to some degree, it seems like displacement itself is... if you have a big ship, it's just harder to sink it. It's a lot of tonnage to sink. You have to put a lot of holes in a bigger ship than you do in a smaller ship. So I kind of use displacement as my armor. That's kind of the theme I've been going towards lately. And the only things I want to protect are turrets, because those can lead to a flash fire, which instantly kills your ship.
Did we have any flash fires, though? Interestingly enough, I just was thinking about that. I know I hit a couple Italian ships that had flash fires, But did any of our ships end up having flash fires?
I don't think there was any French ships that had flash fires.
Yeah, that's right.
No, we
Keep our powder dry.
generally
or
don't, but
wet.
the British have a problem with this.
Yeah. Well, that one came from the, I'd say, discipline of the crew. I mean, like at Jutland, I mean, they were they were meant to close the doors to like the ammo storage, but they would leave them open just to be able to get the
A little
ammunition
bit faster.
through. Yeah,
Yeah.
Well, they were trained to be
can see-
machine gunners, not aiming
Yeah.
their shots.
I mean, that was a tradition from Trafalgar where you had the rate of fire. Like the British rate of fire was incredible for the time,
Mhm.
just absolutely incredible, and you can see that really played on throughout the entirety of the Royal Navy's history. I don't know if it really plays out much today. I don't think it's really something that can be said. I mean, with the automated loading, etc., it's not something like you have somebody like throwing a shell in there. But yeah, rate of fire was definitely a part of the Royal Navy's heritage.
And I might have lost one of my cruisers to a flash fire now that I think about it. It might have been either the, I'm thinking it might have been the Le Touche de Treville, but one of those early kind of quasi battleship cruisers that I built that had, huge secondary armaments. It wasn't this one. I think there was a different design. I can't remember it, but I think you guys were a little bit off put by my cruisers basically costing as much as battleships. But the interesting thing is early in the game, the design limitations that you have on battleships also almost makes heavy cruisers more valuable because you can make them faster, you can make them basically just as big, and the secondary armaments to me seem to have less of a limitation where you can have massive secondaries. The main limitation is just that main gun caliber. I mean, you could make it a little bit bigger, but I think the cruisers in the early war are actually more valuable than people give it credit to in this game.
Oh yeah. But it's like if you lose the cruise, it doesn't matter as much as battleship.
Yeah, I
that
think
too.
with that, it seems like the armored cruisers are pulled into conflicts more often, so they have a greater weight assigned to them than just like being an armored cruiser versus a dreadnought or a battleship.
Yeah, and I think one other thing is, for a while, I kind of wanted to go the Tirpitz route, and just like a ship's design is to stay afloat. So build a super armored ship and make a little bit weaker guns. But I had a few bad experiences when I played in one-on-one games like Spain, where Spain already starts off with crappy heavy guns to begin with. So I kind of went with this mantra of armor over firepower. And I think, especially in the pre-Dreadnought era, that does not work. Like I hit Italian ships. I was in a war with Italy. I hit them over and over again. But it did no damage because there were like 9 or 10-inch shells, and the enemy was hitting me, and it was just like literally sailing around until you ran out of ammo and then sail back, and they seemed completely ineffectual. So I kind of went with that heavier firepower route versus heavier armor route.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that that's why I build glass cannon. I have the same experience. Building really heavily armored ships doesn't seem to be nearly as effective as just destroying the other ship faster.
Yeah. But I don't know. What did you want to jump into Q&A at this point, or did either of you want to talk about any designs that you hadn't? We kind of jumped into. We already sort of talked about things we learned, but did either of you have a design you wanted to highlight before we jump into Q&A?
Yeah, let's just take a look at the Gamer Aléatoire, just because it's probably the most devastating ship I've ever built.
The Gamer Aléatoire?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's I guess this is supposed to be my bad French translation of random gamer. Anyway, the interesting thing I've been going towards lately with ship designs is like this 4-2-2-4, but I'm not sure if it's maybe better to do 3-3-3-3. It's a debate. Anyway, I wanted to point out this ship because unfortunately it didn't actually see action, but that's it. That's all I wanted to say about it.
I just wanted to show you my great design.
It would have worked well if XTRG had gone to war.
That's true.
That pacifist jerk.
Yeah. Somebody's got to be at peace.
Says no one.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, so can we talk about the Dunkirk again, actually?
Sure.
So there's one more thing I want to bring up about the Dunkirk. Right, okay. So if you take a look at the speed there, like, this ship was 30 knots. Now, what year did I design this ship? Was it... it was very early. I think it was like... Was it...
Does it tell you?
Yeah.
I don't think it...
actually, I
can...
remember that, actually. Does it tell you when it was built? Is it in the almanac?
The Dunkirk was 1913. I think that's the design year.
Yeah, so you take a look at that. So 13 knots in 1913. That's bloody fast for a ship carrying decent caliber guns. Now, the sort of mantra that I wanted to go for was basically speed. The issue, I know you're going to get me for blaming the game, but you start in knife fighting range. Now, speed usually dictates the combat. I did find in the battles I did fight, but it's difficult if you're slower than the enemy. If you're slower, it's ridiculously difficult to bring them to battle. If they're weaker ship but they're faster, they can just go. It doesn't matter if they're 1 knot faster. That 1 knot will tell in distance. So I want to design a ship but was able to bring firepower and bring it there quickly, but also have the speed to get in and out of engagements. And I was fairly proud of that. I was happy to have a fast ship. That was something I wanted, fast ships.
I think you did a better job of it than me, because when my design philosophy with my cruisers, more so than my battleships, was that, listen, odds are, as France, there's a good likelihood we'll end up at war with England, and we can't go toe-to-toe with them. So we need ships that are fast enough that even if they take a little bit of damage, they'll be able to outrun the enemy. Didn't do a good enough job of kind of scouting out what opposing fleets' speeds were. I think the computer gives a little bit more weight to speed than maybe I do. So I didn't end up designing ships that were fast enough. I think I ended up designing ships that were too well armed or armored, and I sacrificed speed. But at least my mentality of what I wanted was I wanted to try and have ships that were always near the top of the speed range. Maybe not out-distancing or being faster than everything on the seas, but at least fast enough where they could get into a chase and get away. And I don't think I did a very good job of that, but I certainly thought about it when I was designing my ships.
I actually have an interesting topic to bring up for all of us. Something which maybe you changed during the course of this series, Historical Gamer. Secondary turret armament or armor. I always put mine down to just 2, just the minimum that keeps them from being destroyed by splinters. But let's see, maybe go to.
This was one of my early ships, although I didn't have turrets on it, so maybe it's a different design.
This is good. This is still secondaries were 3.5 on this one, right? So
yeah.
This already shows you put secondaries to 3.5, but I noticed by the end you were dropping the secondaries down to 2. And I noticed that XTRG, you always keep your secondaries very high at 6 in that last example. So this one, for example, had secondaries of 2. And you also, let's see, XTRG had in his final ship, the one we were just looking at, I forget.
Was it the Marengo? It had another name, didn't it? What was that name? Was it a Marengo? Magenta.
They all have 6. No, Magenta.
Magenta was the 18-inch one.
So this only had secondaries of 4, but in the previous battle cruiser that we were looking at, was at the Dunkirk, that one had secondaries of 6. So I'm just curious, why do you like to have such heavy secondaries? And also curious, Historical Gamer, what was your philosophy with reducing the secondary turret armor?
Well, let's let XTRG answer his first, and then I'll take it.
Give you time to think. Good.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those things like with these secondaries. I've had some terrible experiences in the past where a lucky hit has just absolutely annihilated the ship by hitting the secondaries and causing a flash fire, which is odd. I don't even think that is a thing in these versions anymore, but that happened. And it's just...
Oh, it still can happen. I've sunk enemy ships this way, but I've never gotten one sunk, so I still roll the dice with low secondary armor.
I don't know. I just feel that 6 inches is a good solid amount. It's just something where it's going to definitely prevent splinters. And when you're in secondary range with other ships, I mean, you have the main guns that are firing at the ship, of course. But then when you get into secondary ranges with the enemy ships, you're noticing that they have huge amounts of secondary and tertiary guns. So your secondaries are getting hit by multiple shells. They might not be large shells, but they're getting hit by multiple shells after multiple shells. So you imagine the percentage chance of a critical hit increases as time goes on with the amount of shells being fired. So I kind of go for a up-armored secondary doctrine, and I don't think it hurt me. I was able to design around that limitation.
Okay, interesting.
Well, and I think for me, I know you said my mentality may have changed, and I think you're right, but I think mine was more of a different technology mindset. So when you're looking at early warships, you're looking at pre-dreadnought era ships, I think you need heavier secondary armament because those secondary guns are much more important to your total firepower than later guns or later ships. So like if we look at, I'm going to say, this may be a bad example, but the historical gamer class. So I had 7-inch secondaries there, right? And
yeah, in this sense, it made more sense though because these are 10-inch guns.
Right. So, but that's my overall mentality. Is like even with my Tours class, which are 8-inch guns and 6-inch guns, the difference there is so minimal that those secondary batteries can make a big difference in a cruiser engagement, or in this case, in a battleship engagement. 10-inch guns can make a big difference. So you need to protect those because you've only got 2 main guns. So those secondaries are really important to your overall firepower. On the other hand, when you're looking at something that's firing, a 17-inch shell, the secondaries are much less important relatively because the difference between your primary armament and your secondary armament is so much bigger when you're looking at, the THG2 class, where you've got 4-inch guns as your secondaries and you've got 17-inch guns as your main. So I think it's really just the relative percentage of your firepower that you allocate to your secondaries influences how important the armor is on those secondaries. That's my overall mindset. Now, admittedly, I think maybe you guys play a little bit differently, but I enjoy playing Rule the Waves not from a min-max standpoint. I know a lot of strategy gamers kind of min-max and see like what's the most you can possibly do, and I like playing with limited information personally and making mistakes. To me, it feels more like an authentic experience. Everybody's looking for different things, but for me, I don't like. I know sometimes people are going in looking at gun data to decide what's the armor. I just kind of design ships that feel right. And my mentality when I'm building those secondaries and they're only a 2-inch difference from the main gun is that, it should theoretically, in my mind, be important. I don't know if that's how the game treats it, but that's, I think a ship designer in 1900 would think that. And then, you let results figure things out and you learn from there.
Yeah, that was part of the point of this series even, was just to have a bunch of people designing different ships, because that's more how it is in real life.
Well, maybe back then, not today, that's for sure. Like today, you've got all these computer models. You're going to figure everything out of every possible scenario. Whereas like back then, it was all by feel. Right. I mean, you had some assumptions, but you couldn't validate them in the same way that you can today, right?
Yeah, I agree. So it's kind of nice to introduce that randomness back into the system because, yeah, I do that. I min-max a lot. It takes away a little bit of the surprise. I mean, the whole era that we're in here, the 1900s to 1930s, was basically like insane technological advancements where that you didn't know which technological advancement was going to be good. That's where we had this really terrible 13-inch guns from the Brits, right? And they didn't know that they were going to be terrible. Otherwise, they wouldn't have put them on. So
the 13.5-inch.
Was that it? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what they were. That was like on the line class,
early 1900s.
Right?
Yeah, they had some really interesting guns.
But they were also going on the metric, sort of millimeter system, weren't they, technically? So were they thinking it was 13.5? Or were they thinking it's like 290 millimeters, and just from an American-centric view, it's like, oh, that converts out to a really weird caliber. Because Americans are the best at everything. Get out of here, XTRG.
Oh, I know. I'm just going to take my ball and go home.
Did you guys want to talk about any other designs, or did you want to jump into some Q&A?
I have a question. Well, I have a question for me, so...
Q&A? Yeah. XTRG is the first question.
What's Rule the Waves?
Yeah.
What's this blue thing in the map? It's not land. I can't walk on it. I'm going to assume it's water. Anyway, right, so the question. Now, this is from Taranyan. What are your views on submarines in the game? Right, well, it's interesting when it comes to submarines. It's like you take a look at the conflict like the American Civil War, and you see that the Confederates were outnumbered, heavily outnumbered. Now, the Union fleet wasn't really anywhere near sufficient enough in numbers to patrol or even enforce a total blockade, which is pretty funny. Like, you had this blockade, and yeah, it's interesting. It was never truly a full blockade, but the Americans said, yeah, this is a blockade, and as long as you could try and prove that you were trying to enforce a blockade, it was considered a true blockade and therefore legal. Well, yeah, kind of. Let's not get into the details, but yeah, you had the numerically inferior and in terms of quality inferior Confederate Navy So they went out of the box. They came up with the first submarines. Am I correct in saying that the first submarine was a Confederate design?
I mean, technically, I think the first submarine goes back to like the Revolutionary War, but the first
Yeah.
real submarine was the Hunley, which was the Confederates. Yeah,
Yeah, didn't it go out 3 times and it sank on the third time?
something like that. Yeah, I think it didn't. Did it sink a ship and sank while it sank the ship? I'm not an expert
Yeah,
in it, but
I mean, there was a lot of ships at that time, right? A lot of ships during the Civil War suffered more like sinking problems than actual damage problems from enemy fire.
yeah, but it did. At the end of the day, it did sink. And I know I think they pulled it up or part of it up like a couple of years ago, but it sank I want to say an a Union screw sloop. I think it was called the Houstonic.
yeah. I mean, I'm pretty sure they went through 2 crews and then the last crew was unfortunate. But yeah, you take a look at that sort of thing where the Confederates are using something that's practically revolutionary. And that's what I've always liked about the submarines. It's like you saw in the Second World War, like how dangerous they could be and the psychological impact of a submarine. I mean, they are fairly lightweight ships to produce. I mean, they're fairly easy to produce. So I wanted to get as many as I could out there because they're wild cards in Rule the Waves. They are really wild cards.
They played a
They
big
can,
part in my win against my first. I think it was no, my second win against Italy. Is that
yeah,
constant drain on Italian shipping and victory points really can play a big role in these games. Sometimes too much. I think the game doesn't do a great job of figuring out like what nations have a lot of commerce versus others. So like if you're Austria, I don't know how important losing a few merchants should really be, but they definitely the game models them well. And to your point, this is a really interesting era of ship design, especially for submarines, where they go from being like a mix of gasoline fired, petrol fired, to diesel, like the different designs of how there were steam powered submarines at one point in this era, and they were a nightmare to be on and would roast their crews, but it was a really interesting era. I read a American book about the American submarine war against Japan in World War II called Silent Victory, and it dedicates like 100 or so pages to sort of the submarine development leading up to World War One, really. And this era obviously covers that, and it's a fascinating story of technological development. Which, to your point, yeah, I think the game does a good job. I think it would be interesting if you could actually design the submarines.
oh god, that'd be amazing.
Well, if we can go to the almanac, even we can look at one of the problems with submarines in this game, which is just how the AI uses them. If you scroll down to the very bottom, well, I'm sure we'll find that Italy has over 100. Great Britain has close to 100. What happens is the game just. I know that there's historical basis for this. The AI builds a ton of submarines if they lose a war, and you can get this into insane levels. And submarines are extremely effective in this game. You can do. I think I did one time a American Civil War, the Confederate playthrough, just building submarines. Just my idea was just to win by submarines, and it was very effective. I didn't win until like the mid 1910s because submarines aren't effective until then. But I think, if I'm not mistaken, submarines, the Germany was more successful in World War One with submarines than they were in World War Two.
World War One, they definitely were, yeah.
Yeah, on like
Yeah.
a raw tonnage scale or something. I don't know. I mean, it depends on how you define successful, anyway.
I mean, the same author who wrote that Silent Victory book has a 2-volume history on World War II submarine war. I'm just starting to read it, but at the end of the day, his thesis is the Germans were never really that close to winning by subs in World War II, and a lot of the success against them wasn't publicized for propaganda and war fighting reasons. They didn't want to tell the Germans how they were actually, not that they were doing great even during the happy times, but it never really got to the crisis level that it did in World War One.
Right. So I think that it's the only reason why I don't focus on it in this game is just because it's boring, right? There's just a strategic level, and you don't do anything. Like, you see submarines sometimes in the tactical maps. Sometimes they may. I've even had, I think, one time in my entire lifespan of playing Rule of Waves, whatever, over a year and a half of playing Rule of Waves, I think I've only seen them launch torpedoes from a submarine at me on the tactical map one time. So they're not really exciting to use. In that Confederate States of America playthrough when I did submarines, the reason why I was doing them is because it makes that you can decline every tactical battle. I wanted to do an entire 25-year playthrough in 2 hours, and in order to do that, you just can't fight any tactical battles. So I was just declining everything and trying to only use submarines to gain victory. And so they're effective. What do I think about them? They're not very fun.
The glories of submarine warfare and us complaining about it. Anyway, guys, the Historical Gamer here again, and I'm jumping in here at the end of part 2 of our live stream after action review of Rule the Waves. There is one more part, about another 30 minutes left of the stream, which we will cover in part 3. Again, I'm just breaking these up into bite-sized pieces, so I hope you guys enjoyed this. Please feel free to comment below, and until next time, it's the Historical Gamer saying thank you for watching, and I'm out.